happiness, like there's these polls of like which are the happiest countries in the world and the happiest ages, and finding happiness is always a challenge for many people, or at least feeling that you're happy and fulfilled. There's always, everyone wants to know the secret of happiness. So we have the answer in this class. We are going to learn why people feel unhappy and what you could do to be happy. There's obviously a lot more than that, but we're going to use, I'm gonna zero in on the happiness factor, because what makes somebody happy? What makes somebody feel happy? And I'm not giving you an expert opinion, I'm just giving you my personal opinion. But happiness means that, at least in my opinion, that you are comfortable in your own skin. You're comfortable with who you are. You're comfortable with what you know. You're comfortable with the situation as it is, and you're comfortable. And you don't feel out. You don't feel like you're in the wrong place or in the wrong body at the wrong time. You don't feel out of place. You're comfortable. You're comfortable that you understand. You get it. You know where you are. So now, what leads to unhappiness is the opposite of that. Because the unhappiness is when you're questioning, like, what am I doing with my life? Why am I not doing this? Or why am I not successful? Or why am I not like, in other words, all the things that you're missing, or you think that you're missing, or the feeling of being incomplete leads to people feeling unhappy. And when I say unhappy, I mean like uncomfortable. Because I'm not talking about the idea of God forbid something happens to someone that obviously they have a reason to be unhappy. I'm not talking about just a general feeling of self confidence of who you are, and confidence in your own skin, confidence of the situation that you're in, and what you bring to the table. And a lack of confidence of that leads to a sense of like you don't belong, you're uncomfortable, you're always trying to compensate, and it comes off sometimes, not in the you don't feel good about things. So what we're going to learn about tonight is the half shekel. The half shekel is actually not in this week's parsha. It's in the portion of Kisisa, but because we are in the Shabbat, we bless the month of Adar. So the tradition is that we read the portion of the half shekel as the maftir, as the bonus portion. So we're going to learn about the half shekel. So what was the mitzvah of the half shekel? So we have it over here. Let's just read it because might as well. All who are counted must give, anyone who's counted amongst the Jewish people must give a half shekel of the sacred shekels, which is basically gives the amount 20 geta, which was a weight. A half shekel should be an offering to God. Everyone who goes through the counting from the age of 20 and upward shall give an offering to God. A wealthy person should not give more, and a poor person should not give less than half a shekel, with which to give the offering to God to atone for your souls. And you shall take the silver of the atonements from the children of Israel and use it for the work of the Ohel Moed, which is the Mishkan, which is the Beis HaMikdash before the Beis HaMikdash existed. And it shall be a remembrance for the children of Israel before God to atone for your souls. Okay, very simple. Everyone had to give a half shekel, and it was also used as a way of counting the people from age 20 and up. So let's first go to the basic one that's the question that always comes up: why a half shekel? Not only that, as the Rambam points out, I think we have the text here, the Rambam points out, yes, perfect. The Rambam points out that the half shekel continued even in different currencies. So the mitzvah of giving half shekel entails donating a half of the coin that is the common currency at the time. So when the common currency was a darkon, everyone gave a sela, which is basically the value of a half a darkon. When the common currency was a sela, which is the Talmudic currency that during the Talmudic times, everyone gave a half a sela, the equivalent of 2 dinar, because 4 dinar was worth a sela. When the common currency was a half a sela, everyone gave that coin a half a selah. So, in other words, because it was called a half a sela. So today, what do we do today? Even though today it's not a mitzvah because we're not in the times of the Holy Temple, what do we do to commemorate this? We give a $50, because the dollar is the currency that we're in. I don't know what people do in other countries where there's the current, like, I'm not sure how that works, but I know in America we give a $50, and we want it to be a silver $50 because we want to represent the same material that was used during the times of the of the temple, as well as the times of when the mitzvah was first given. But once again, today it's more of a tradition. It's a custom because we're trying to participate, but it's not a biblical commandment in today's times until the Beis Hamikdash comes back, because there's no sacrifices. Now, we're going to learn about what this money was used for, because that's also very important to the lesson. But what is the idea of a half? Why is the Torah getting, like, just keep it simple, round it up, 1 shekel a person, keep it simple? What's the idea of a half? Now, there are many other symbols in the Holy Temple that were also half related, such as the chatzotzros, the trumpets. So the trumpets were basically a half a circle. I tried looking this up before the class to get like a visual, but I found some stuff, but I don't know if it was reliable, so I'm not going to share it. But basically, the trumpets were a half circle, and there were 2 people blowing the trumpets, so basically represented 2 halves of a whole and 2 halves coming together. But if you also look at the design of the vessels in the Mishkan and the Holy Temple, there was the table, which was basically a half a table, and the altar, or even the ark, represent, like, it kind of had like this half. There was like a half of a cut to it that basically made it look like there was another half. I'm not sure how it worked with the ark, but with the table, it had 2 legs, as if it was like a half a table meant to be joined with another table. And it wasn't a table, we know it was like shelves. But the point is, the Torah is very specific about the half. So what is the message of this half? So the Rambam continues, it is a positive commandment from the Torah that every Jewish male donates a half a silver coin every year. This could not be paid in installments, a little today and a little tomorrow. Rather, it had to be given all at once in one payment. So as it says, the rich cannot increase and the poor cannot decrease, and it had to be paid in full. In other words, there's no, even though it's a half, but the mitzvah had to be done the whole thing right now, and that's it. There's no compromises here, biblically. So, what's the idea of half? So there are many explanations and messages about the half shekel, and a person can. Sorry, my bad. I pressed mute. A person can never feel that they are complete without somebody else, and of course, the message is that you're not complete without God. But why is the Torah giving this message through the half shekel? Like, why is this mitzvah the conduit or the vessel for this message of everyone is only a half and you can't ever think of yourself as a whole? So, especially because, by the way, look at what we have from one of the commandments. This is one of the commandments, at least the explanation of the commandments, that everything had to be full. You could not do anything halfway in the Mishkan. Whatever was holy was full holy. You couldn't do anything that wasn't full. Meaning, like, whether it was a sacrifice, you couldn't give a half a sacrifice. You couldn't give but I don't have any other examples, but basically the mitzvahs that were related to the Holy Temple had to be done in a full measure and can never be done in half. So here's the other vessels of the Mishkan, the chatzotzros, the trumpets. So it says that they were a half. The chatzotzros also comes from the word chatzi, which means a half, which comes from chatzi tzura, a half of image. And as we see in other vessels as well, that there were only a half on purpose for the same message. So the inner meaning of 2 silver trumpets is that a human without God is merely a half image, chatzi tzura. The human is merely dam, blood, and the aleph in chatzot, the aleph, a reference to the one God alone, is incomplete, as it were. However, when they merge, a whole image is formed. So this is a scary text to read, because God forbid to say that God is incomplete without the human being. God is everything. God's infinite. God doesn't need anything to be perfect. God doesn't need anything to be. So what's the idea of that we are half and we need God? That would make sense. We're human. We're imperfect and we need God. Without God, we're not a complete individual. So what does it mean from the other side? So the idea of God I don't want to say the words, but the idea that we're the other half of God is that God makes himself, gives of himself, and so to speak, lowers himself to connect with us as if he needs us to complete it. So in essence, God doesn't need us at all. In essence, God is complete and is full, is infinite, and doesn't need any human behavior or interaction for, to say that God needs us for his completeness is saying there's something lacking in God, and that's obviously not the case. So what does God do? He makes himself, lowers himself, and condenses his energy in order to connect with us, in order to be that second half of us. So therefore, we're each providing a half of the coin, or a half of the image, in this case, of the trumpets. I guess a comparison would be is when you have a great person, or even a parent, or even a teacher, or someone that lowers themselves. Let's say you have a parent. So the parent lowers themselves to connect and to be able to really relate to the child, which is a natural thing for a parent to do, even though the parent is much smarter and much more experienced at life than the child is. But the parent will lower themselves to relate to the child in order so the child should feel a connection and a bond that the parent feels for the child as well. So in a way, it's not the same, obviously, because God is perfect, but God lowers himself to our level to be able to have a relationship with us. But more importantly is that we have to see ourselves as a half in order to know that our other half is God, and that without God, we are only a half of image. So what does this have to do with a half shekel? Sorry, what does this have to do with a half shekel? And sorry, why is this message being shared through the half shekel? And what is this message really supposed to do for us? Yes, we know we have a soul that's a part of God, right? We know that we are created in the image of God, and we know that without God we're nothing. Fine, so we know this. So what are we supposed to take from this message practically to do differently or think differently for something that we already know already? So let's first examine the concept of the partnership, or the nature of the partnership. So the word Adam, which is the name of the first man, is also the name in Hebrew of a human being. And the letters Adam is Aleph, Dalet, and Mem. That's the three letters here. Now, if you take away the Aleph, you're left with Dam, which means blood, which represents the flesh and blood of a human being. Now, interestingly, Kabbalah teaches us that the soul, the godly soul, actually resides in the blood of a human being. That's just like the blood is everywhere within the human being. The Gedam Hu Nefesh is that the soul of God, the soul is found within the blood of a human being. In fact, there's even a commentary that says one of the reasons why a person blushes and gets red in the face when they're embarrassed is because the soul's trying to leave the body. The soul feels uncomfortable when it's being shamed, and it wants to leave the body, and therefore the blood rushes to the face. Interesting fun fact. Not fun, but interesting fact. Now, Dam alone, the flesh and blood alone, is not able to be a human being. You need to have the Aleph, which is Alufei Shel Elam, which is the oneness of the world, the force, the empowerment of the world, and you connect that with the Dam, with the blood, and then you have a human being. So you have the soul of God, the part of God that he blew into his nostrils, which is the soul, and then you have the flesh and blood of the human being that you pull them together, and you have a complete human being. And for one to think for the human being to think that you don't need the Aleph is basically like a person thinking they don't need their head, or their heart. But it's just as essential. The soul of God is just as essential, if not more essential, than the brain or the heart of a human being. So that's the message. Sorry, that's the core message. But what are we supposed to take from that, and how does this play out in the mitzvah of a half shekel? So this quote is from the Shalah HaKadosh, the great Kabbalist who lived about 500 years ago. And he wrote a book called Shnei Luchos HaBris, which means the two tablets of the covenant. And he wrote many books on Kabbalah, and he wrote many commentaries on the holiday of Shavuos. And it's just he has a lot of interesting things to say. This context of this is specifically talking to Jewish people. So we're not here to, as you'll notice in the text, it's not here to negate someone who's non-Jewish. It's more to empower those who are Jewish that he's talking to. So just take it in stride and in context. But it is widely known that the souls of the Jewish people are a part of God above. This is implied by the passage, for his people are part of God, What does this mean? This means that it is literally a part, the soul is literally a part of God. It is like a piece that was separated from a larger utensil, which is identical to and part of the utensil from which it was separated. There's no distinction between the smaller part and the larger utensil, except that the utensil is the whole is whole and larger, and the separated piece is a part and smaller. Otherwise, they are the same material. Similarly, there's no separation and difference between the soul and God, except that God is whole, encompassing endless light, and the soul is a part of this light, a spark separated from the great blessed light. So the idea that we are a part of God is it's not just a saying, but he's basically saying that it's a chilek elikam mim'al mamish, it's a part of God's essence, literally, not metaphorically, but the soul is literally a part of God. And when the soul is with God, there's no distinction between the soul and God. So the soul that you have that powers you is literally a part of God. What are you supposed to do with that information? What are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to implement this knowledge into your being and into your daily life? So number one, understanding that you alone, without your soul and without God, is never going to be happy and comfortable. Okay, this is the controversial piece. And this is why people are unhappy. And this is why people are always searching for meaning or happiness or something, and people are writing books and whatever, and how to be comfortable in your own skin and whatever. But ultimately, if there's a part of you that is crucial to you that you're not tapping into and you're not acknowledging, then you're constantly going to be running around in circles searching for something that's in you, but you're not actually acknowledging its existence. So therefore, you're never going to fully feel comfortable with the fact that it's part of you. I'm trying to think of some more human examples for us, but one of the most important factors of being comfortable in your own skin that psychologists say is that you have to be comfortable with who you are as a person, which means that you understand who you are, you recognize who you are, you recognize how you look, you recognize how people perceive you, you recognize what you are and what you're not. And when you're comfortable with that, then you're more able to be happy because you have no like unrealistic world views of yourself that when somebody pops that bubble, they hurt you. In other words, if you think you're the greatest singer in the world, and when you sing someone says you sound terrible, then it's going to hurt your feelings because you think you're a good singer and someone told you that you're not. But if you know that you're not a good singer, like myself, and someone says you sound terrible, I know I'm not. You want to tell me something I don't know. Not comparable, but the idea that God is a part of us is something that we have to acknowledge. And by acknowledging it, regardless of the level that we cultivate the part of God, acknowledging it is the first step to a sense of feeling comfortable being imperfect. Because on the one hand, we have this part of God within us that is perfect, the soul of God. But on the other hand, the life that we were created to live is imperfect. So we're comfortable with the fact that we're not perfect. And that without tapping into our soul and totally letting the soul shine through, we're imperfect. And we're comfortable with that because when I say comfortable, I don't mean complacent, very different. Complacent means that you're not trying to be better. That's different. Comfortable meaning is that you have this honest recognition of who you are and who you're not. You know that you have a soul, you know that you have a body, you know that you're conditioned to be this kind of person, that this is the reality that you live. So the first step is acknowledging that the soul is a part of us and acknowledging that we're incomplete without the soul. Um, there's another important aspect to this, that it's not just about acknowledging, but when you try to not acknowledge it or try to push it away or forget about it, it hurts, it makes you feel even more unhappy. So for example, when you want to do something you know you're not supposed to do, right? If somebody is going to go and do something that they know God doesn't want them to do, but as we all know, we don't always do the right thing. So during those moments, God is still a part of us. The soul doesn't leave our body. The soul is still there experiencing it with us. So what we try to do sometimes is forget about the soul and just, we'll get back to you tomorrow after we're finished with whatever it is that we want to do. So it's during that time that we're kind of in denial of who we are, and it makes us feel not true to ourselves, not because we did something wrong for God, but because we're just not fully in acknowledgement of who we are. Now, for someone to be comfortable with the fact that they're taking God with them into all the dirty places they want to go, that's a different story. That takes a whole nother level of, like you say in Yiddish, grabkeit, a whole nother level of coarseness. But for an average person, you don't want to hurt your soul. I mean, we all do things that we're not supposed to do, but we still don't want to hurt our soul. So we try to forget about it during those moments, and that also makes us feel uncomfortable. So what does the half shekel do for us? So the Rebbe says like this. This is the idea that half shekel arouses the godly soul within us, and I don't know what this word means, but it basically means it inspires the feeling that we are merely a half, and we long and desire to unite with our other half. The word in Hebrew is ma'oder. It lifts up, it like sparks this idea that we're just a half. So how do we live a life where we don't forget about our soul, and that we don't ignore our soul, and we don't just cover it up for the time being for us to do what we want to do? Is we put reminders in our life that keep on telling us that taking God with us. So there's a really cute children's movie that we used to watch as kids that's called Lights. And it's about the story of Hanukkah and a cartoon. It's like a cartoon Hanukkah movie, video, 20 minutes, I think. And one of the cute things that the cartoon does is that one of the Jews that wants to Hellenize and become like the Greeks, so he has this aleph, this spark aleph that's on his shoulder that's never letting him go. Whatever he's doing, the aleph is constantly like bothering him, and constantly like nudging him, like, what are you doing? Like, and he's trying to get rid of the aleph the whole time, like it's like a fiery aleph, and he's trying to get rid of the aleph because he can't enjoy himself with the aleph sitting on his shoulder. It's actually a brilliant concept, and it was, I mean, remember it as a kid, it was done brilliantly, but it's exactly what we're talking about, because the half shekel is to remind us that aleph is on our shoulder. The half shekel is there to remind us that the soul is there. It's a part of God, and it ain't going nowhere. And we might as well acknowledge it. We might as well tap into it. We might as well get comfortable with it. If we give a whole shekel, then we might make the mistake that my mitzvah, I did it. I gave a complete mitzvah. I didn't need any help. It's a complete mitzvah, and it's all there. And I check the list, check the box, and we're good to go. And there are some mitzvahs that we should feel that way, but this mitzvah per se is still a mitzvah. It's a biblical commandment, but it's one that is also meant to remind us that even though we did the mitzvah, we still need help. We still need that part of God within us to constantly fuel us, inspire us, and connect us to God. Otherwise, we're really not a complete person. We're like a half a body walking around. Okay. There's actually a story in the teacher's manual that I want to share. And I heard this story before, but I think it's a really good analogy to this as well. There was a father who was a doctor, that he had this like dream of always going around and sharing his medical research that he was doing. In other words, in addition to being a doctor, he used to do a lot of medical research, and he wanted to have the opportunity to share, to go to conferences, to travel, and to do more than just seeing patients. And he finally, after many, many years, was given this opportunity to go to all around South America and speak about some of his medical discoveries that he made to to developing countries. And he was really excited, and he was going to go for a few months, so it was a long trip. And I think it was like the Friday before he was supposed to leave, which was on a Sunday. He gets a call from his son, his, I think, 20-year-old son, who says, Dad, I'm really not doing well. I'm having a very hard time. I need to come see you. I'm going to be there on Sunday. And the father basically said, sure, no problem. I'll be there. I'll see you. And I hope you're, hang in there, and we'll see you on Sunday. And he called I guess, the company that was bringing him out to do the speeches, and said, I have to cancel. I have an emergency. I can't come. And when his son arrived on Sunday, he was there for him. They hugged, they embraced, they both cried, and they spent those few weeks together. And the father writing this story, I think it was in a book, he wrote the story, he said, that hug and those cries were the best speech I ever gave. In other words, here he has this like lifelong dream of what he wants to do career-wise. But the fact that his son needed him, everything else went, to a distant second. And his priority was his priority. And it was obvious that that was his priority, and it was able to be experienced. So the half shekel is that reminder that even when we are on this journey of life, even in the good times, we still need that reminder to constantly connect and to realize that we have another side of us that always needs to be nurtured. So we're going to go into an area now of Chassidic teachings and about the soul, about what the reminder of the soul does for us. And it comes from the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, where he basically plays out the scenario, the worst case scenario for a Jew, the worst case physically for a Jew, whereas when we're called upon to give our life for God, and how no matter who we are, no matter what level of holiness we are, what level of observance we are, when it comes time to make this decision, we will never give up God for whatever it is that we're being promised, and we're always ready to give our life. So here's what the Rebbe is quoting the Alter Rebbe says. All Jews are prepared to give their lives for God because a Jew is incapable of denying the one God. We sense intuitively that we cannot separate from God, and this feeling is stimulated by reflecting on our innate bond with God like two halves of one image. When we sense that God is our life, our authentic selves, because He animates our souls, any separation between God and us, two halves of one whole, become impossible. And we have so many stories, and one story that I like to tell. It's a sad story, but there was a mayor of a town in Romania, I think, that Romania was one of the Nazi allies. And when the Nazis came to Romania, I think it was Romania. This mayor was even though he was Jewish, he was very anti-Semitic. It's not a new thing that Jews could be anti-Semitic. This guy would torture the Jewish community, and he would always make life difficult for them. Whenever they wanted to do anything, he would make life very difficult. And the Jewish community couldn't stand him; they hated him, and he completely disconnected. He disconnected himself, and he wouldn't even call himself a Jew. When the Nazis came, so of course, when the Nazis came, they didn't care, like, if you denounced your Judaism. If you're Jewish blood, you're Jewish blood. So they rounded everyone up to the synagogue, and they brought this mayor, and they told him they had everyone take out the Torahs from the shul, and they told the mayor, take the Torah, throw it in the fire. And this is the mayor that tortured the Jewish people. And the mayor refused. And the Nazi said, if you don't throw the Torah in the fire, we're going to set you on fire with the Torah. And unfortunately, that's what they did. So here you have a guy who totally disrespected the Torah his whole life, but when it came down to it, he was ready to give up his life. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying is a fact. It's proven over and over again through the Spanish Inquisition and all the other good, beautiful countries that everyone loves who tortured us in the last however many years. We've proven this over and over again. The Jews in the Spanish Inquisition didn't know anything about their Judaism, but they were ready to give their lives when they were put to the test. Why are we sharing this? Because thank God we don't live in that kind of, well, for now, we don't live in that kind of situation where we're being asked to convert to another religion or lose our lives. But what the Alter Rebbe points out is that if we know that we're ready to give our lives for God, if someone challenges us, why can't we do that for choosing to eat kosher over non-kosher? Why can't we do that over doing a mitzvah versus the opposite? Because ultimately the same thing happens. We do a mitzvah, we connect to Hashem. We do something that we're not supposed to do, then we disconnect. So it's the same thing. And one we're ready to give our lives for, and one we're content with. So the Alter Rebbe uses that to help inspire us that if it's already part of us, it's already there, it's already going to wake up no matter what, because and give your life. You could accomplish the same thing by eating kosher versus non-kosher, and you're literally accomplishing the same concept. You're connecting to God, and you don't have to give up your life for that. You just have to give up the cheeseburger, and you have a kosher burger instead. And you're literally accomplishing the same thing that somebody accomplished by being thrown in the fire as opposed to give up God. So for us, we just look at them as their regular mitzvahs. We don't think that they're disconnecting us from God, but the Alter Rebbe says they are, and therefore we should use the inspiration that we already have, that we know we're ready to give our lives, and use that to infuse the daily choices that we have to make about doing good over not good. And this is the half shekel. The half shekel is that reminder. It's the reminder that we are so connected to God that if somebody, no matter who we are, we could be like as bad as that mayor. And if somebody holds us to the fire and says, either convert to my religion or give up your religion or you're going to die, we give up our life. That's the half shekel reminding us that. And thank God we don't have to do that anymore. Not the half shekel, but the giving up your life. But you could do a mitzvah. And that mitzvah builds that connection that we know we're part of anyways. It's just acknowledging that it's there, and it's acknowledging that it's a part of us, and we might as well connect. I think there's a YouTuber. Okay, I might be wrong about this, but I think there's a YouTuber that was trying to do an experiment where they took a couple that was divorced, an ex-husband and ex-wife, and they basically had to live together for a certain amount of time, and they had to be locked in a room. Well, sorry, locked in like an apartment. They had everything they needed, and if they could live in the same apartment for like 6 months or whatever, then they're going to get like a crazy amount of money, something like that. And the idea was to see if the couple, I'm trying to remember the details here, but if the couple could just be apathetic and just live separate lives in an apartment, or if they're going to reunite and become married and want to get married again, or if they're going to reaffirm why they got divorced. I don't know, something like that. But what was interesting about it was there was no neutral, like I didn't watch it. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched some of the clips, and there was no neutral ground in their relationship. It was either we're going to get back together, or it was we are hating each other and fighting and fighting and fighting. But there was no possibility of them not acknowledging each other's existence. What was interesting to me about that was, and listen, I saw it a while ago, so I don't remember exactly the context, but so it may have totally been staged. I don't know. But what was interesting, the point of it is that there's a certain part of you that you can't just not acknowledge. You're either going to fight it or you're going to accept it, or you're going to embrace it, but you can't just ignore it. And that's the soul. You can't just be apathetic to the soul. Rabbi Manas Friedman was once giving a class in Yerushalayim, and he was inviting people to his Torah. I think it was a Talmud class. He was giving a Talmud class, and he invited some Israeli guy. And the Israeli guy said, it was a class on Shabbos. It was a Talmud class on Shabbos. It was a class on Shabbos, and he invited this Israeli guy. And the Israeli said, I am not good for your class. You don't want to come to my class. You don't want me at your class. I make sure every Shabbat to eat pork. That I specifically eat pork on Shabbos. That's how bad I am. You don't want me at your Talmud class. And Rabbi Friedman said, actually, we're very much alike. We both celebrate Shabbos. We both acknowledge Shabbos. We both do something that we find special on Shabbos. I make Kiddush, eat challah, and you eat pork. On Shabbos, it's special to you. In other words, you can't just be apathetic to Shabbos. You have to do something bad on Shabbos. That means that it's part of you. It's there. You can't ignore it. So you're fighting it, but it's there. And the difference between fighting it and embracing it is not so far as we think sometimes. Which is basically what the half shekel is all about, is that it's there and we have to embrace it. Obviously, we shouldn't embrace it in the fighting way, but the point is that the fighting kind of reminds us that it's there and there's nothing we can do. It's part of us. It's our essence. Now, why did the half shekel have to be paid in whole? If it's a half shekel, can I just pay it in quarters? In other words, I'll pay a quarter of a shekel and another quarter. So because this idea of your connection to your soul, as the Rebbe says here, it's not possible to die a little for God or die a lot for God. Self-sacrifice means that we give up our entire life, the quintessential, the indivisible point of life, and that's the deepest connection that we have with God. So to the positive, it also has to be complete because we are giving ourselves fully to God. So, um, so the half shekel reminds us that we are a part of God. But the idea that we have to pay it in whole represents that we are fully committed to God. And not only are fully committed, but it's always there, it's always accessible. So now where did this money go from the half shekel? This is the part that really drives the message home. So from the funds, they purchased the daily offerings, the additional offerings for days of note, and all other communal offerings and the wine libations that accompany them. Additionally, these funds pay for the salt used on all the offerings and wood of the altar. Of course, if the wood was donated, they didn't need to purchase the wood. They also used to purchase the following items: spices for the ketores, offerings, the wages of those who prepare the ketores, the showbread, and the wages of those who prepare it, the annual offering of barley during Passover, and the 2 loaves during Shavuos, and the red heifer, the goat son Ta'azazal, and Yom Kippur, and basically the sacrifice, and the scarlet thread tied between the horns. So all the sacrifices were paid by the half shekel, which tells us that the half shekel itself was like a sacrifice, like basically a way to bring us close, a way to connect us to God. So the funds from the half shekel were there to unite us and bring us close to God. Like korban means offering or draw close. Kirov means closeness, and that's what we're trying to accomplish through the half shekel. And that's why korban is called korban, because it comes from the word close. Now, interestingly, when Moshe was asking Hashem to explain him the half shekel, so it says Hashem showed him a half shekel made of fire. Because just like fire, it connects and it's able to bring things together, the half shekel for us is our connector to God in a way that it inspires and enlightens and brings about the connection that we have. Now, one thing that's important to mention here is that everyone gave a half shekel, even the sinners or everyone had to give a half shekel. And because they all had to give a half shekel, so it brought that connection out that the soul, the part of God, is within us no matter what. And here's what the source of this. We would never part from God's unity and openness, even on pain of death. This is without rhyme or reason, but purely out of divine nature. So if we are ready to do that, how much more so we are prepared to subdue our appetites, which entails much less suffering than death. Once we realize that, even the lightest rabbinical sin transgresses God's will and separates us from God during the forbidden act as much as idolatry. It is very easy to overcome the temptation. And it's very easy to resist and subjugate our nature when we consider deeply that to conquer our nature is much easier than death. In other words, if we're ready to give our lives, well, why not let me just give up my appetite for this sin? Yeah, we would lovingly and willingly accept the pain of death, God forbid, to not be separated from God's unity of oneness, but by an act of idolatry, even for a moment, God forbid. So if we see the sin as an act of idolatry, then we'll be able to empower ourselves and strengthen ourselves to be able to overcome the challenges that the obstacles or challenges that we're facing in preventing us from connecting to Hashem. And the half shekel inspires us to want to have that connection. Now, the Torah uses a term in the verses that we had in the early text in the beginning of the class. So the verses that the Torah uses to explain this mitzvah of half shekel. So the Torah says, "Kola over al pikudim," whoever passes by for the count. That's the natural translation, but there's many layers to the Torah. So this could also mean kola over, whoever transgresses al pikudim on the commandments. It could also mean that they also have to give a half shekel. Because deep down, even the sinner's soul were passing by to be counted, ready to go all in with God. That everyone has this soul, has this part of God that is fully connected with them, just like anyone else. And that's why it says the rich person cannot increase and the poor person cannot decrease, because just like someone could be physically or materially wealthy or materially poor, and they can't increase or decrease, someone who is spiritually wealthy, a righteous person, or someone who's spiritually poor or not so righteous, they all have to give the same equal half shekel, which means they have the same exact soul from God. their connection to God, their connection to their soul is just as powerful. The only difference is in how much is it revealed? How much could you see it? How much does it dominate the person? So it's a reminder that we all have that same soul. And this is why we also have a Moshe Rabbeinu. It's because a Moshe Rabbeinu also has that same soul that we do. Only difference is that his soul is dominating his existence, so it shines through. But because we know we have that same soul, we're inspired that we could do that too. We could live that same life. We could connect ourselves to God in a way that we're talking to God face to face because we have that soul, that part of God. And even if we are even if we are a sinner, we are still connected to God with that same soul. And this is the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe. This is the deeper meaning of this should be given by all who pass by the count. It refers to the 248 laws that correspond to the 248 divine attributes. This means that even those who are prepared to transgress God's laws and turn their back on one of his attributes are required to give a half shekel. Every Jew, even those prepared to transgress God's laws, God forbid, must give the half shekel. And once the donors feel like a mere half, the higher half of God reaches down from above and to pull them up and to connect with them and to hopefully pull them out of their negative actions that consider them Ever al Pikudim. So it's a two-way bond, and we need Hashem to do his part and reveal his essence within us. But obviously he wants us to do our part to connect, and that's through the mitzvah of the half shekel. This is just an interesting thing to finish the class with. So this is from the Talmud, and it's one of those metaphoric coded messages, although this one's not so coded. So Shmuel says to Rabbi Yehuda, smart one seize the moment and eat, seize the moment and drink, referring to good deeds for this world, because you're like at a wedding in this world before we go to the next world. And in this world, we might as well partake in the opportunities that we don't have in the next world, which is to do a mitzvah, because you can't do a mitzvah in the next world. You're celebrating the mitzvahs, but you can't do them because you don't have the physicality. So in this world, we should take advantage and eat and drink, meaning take advantage of the spiritual opportunities of mitzvahs, of Torah and mitzvahs in this world, because we don't have all that time. And when we do that, we connect ourselves with Hashem. So, and we reveal that connection. So we all have that part of God, and this Machatzit HaShekel, giving the half shekel, helps us reveal that, helps us celebrate that, and hopefully let it permeate and let it become part of us in a way that inspires action, inspires us to do more, to want to reveal that special connection we have to Hashem. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.